Okay, welcome. It's what's going on. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and we're doing this on a special time today here at, I guess virtually, LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And my guests today, I've got three guests. One of them is going to be visualless through this. He doesn't believe in sending out his image virtually to the universe, but only his audio. But I'll start with first Stephen Petrus, who is with LaGuardia Archives, LaGuardia Wagner Archives. Excuse me very much. Then Thierry Gourjon, who is a professor of photography and in the Humanities department. And Gabriel Skop, who right now I'm out of practice. Gabriel, you're with social science. You're associate professor of social science. And did I get that right?
No. I'm in TELP, the English Language Center.
Oh, excuse me.
That's all right.
I got a lot of things going on at once here. One of those things is that Dr. Lieberman is trying to figure out how to listen to our show. So I need to send him really quickly the Twitch link. So one of the many technical issues that are going on simultaneously here. Apologies, everybody. So maybe this will help him out and he can join us now. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Hugo. Nice to see you. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
And Terry, by the way, Gabriel, I don't know if this is happening everywhere. I could see you on Twitch. You seem to be moving, but on my Skype link, you are frozen in time. So I don't know what's going on. But we're here. The show today is focusing on, and again here, pull up my cheat sheet, which is an exhibition that folks have been putting together, Rainbow LaGuardia. Right, mm-hmm. Which is, and I will specifically, which is an oral history and video and photography chronicling the personal and professional experiences of the college's LGBT faculty and staff as part of Pride Month. Did I get that right there this time, Stephen?
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect overview in a sentence or two, Hugo.
Okay, good. I'm going to leave this on, so people are just going to hear my emails coming in on the stream. Before we get into the subject of the exhibition, I want to talk a little bit about you gentlemen to introduce yourselves. Gabriel, why don't we start with you, since I got all of your background wrong, and tell us a little bit about your background, your studies, where you came from, those kinds of things.
Okay, briefly, I grew up here in New York. I was born here, and I've been teaching for 40 years. I've been with CUNY for about the last 15 of those 40 years. Most of the time teaching English as a second language, but not exclusively. And what else?
Where'd you study?
Got my bachelor's at San Francisco State. Got my master's at a small school in Vermont called the School for International Training.
All right. What was your focus?
Bachelor's was in psychology, and the master's focused specifically on teaching English as a second language.
All right. Very good. I know a lot of ESL folks, and they're famously gypsies. They love ESL because they could travel around the world and teach wherever they go and live there. Was that one of the things that drew you to the field?
I don't know if it drew me to the field, or I started in the field and then I wandered, but I've been called a gypsy and more. And I've probably taught in about 6 or 7 or 8 different countries. So I guess the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah. All right. Stephen, you want to
talk
sure. about yourself?
Yeah, Hugo, I'm from northern New Jersey. I did undergraduate at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania. I was a double major, history and philosophy. At the time, passionate about the Civil War. But my interests evolved, and I got a master's degree at the University of Alabama, and ultimately my PhD in history at the CUNY Grad Center. I really became focused on urban history and cultural history, of the 20th century, and with a specialization in New York City history in particular. And I ended up writing my dissertation on Greenwich Village in the 50s and 60s, a political and cultural history of the neighborhood, looking at different experimental arts movements, progressive political movements. In the meantime, I had taught in CUNY schools, 6 years at Lehman College, a couple years at Hunter, 1 year at Kingsborough. And then I got a couple of postdocs after I got my PhD. I had a 3-year Mellon postdoc as a curator at the Museum of the City of New York. And I sort of really expanded on my public history skills, learned how to curate exhibitions, develop public programs, work with educational staff, do a lot of visitor engagement. And I had been doing a little bit of this in grad school. I was a historical walking tour guide for Big Onion Walking Tours. I led about 1,000 historical walking tours of New York City neighborhoods. I'd worked for the Tenement Museum. So public history had always been near and dear to me, but I really deepened it at the Museum of the City of New York. My key exhibition there was called Folk City. It was about the folk music revival in New York City from the 1930s to the 60s, centering on Greenwich Village in the 50s and 60s, kind of answering the question, why did the folk music revival really flourish in New York? And I published a book in conjunction with the exhibition. Then I did a year at the New York Historical Society working on my second book, A Cultural History of the Village in the 50s and 60s. And then I ended up at LaGuardia and Wagner Archives about 4 years ago, and been doing a whole range of things at the archives. In fact, Terry and I collaborated with other staff and faculty on several exhibitions. This is our third one together. So we've gotten to know each other really well and really appreciate working with him in particular, mostly on LGBT studies, the history of Queens, LGBT studies. We did this a few years ago at the Queens Museum, based largely on the collection of Danny Drum, city councilman, co-founder of the Queens Pride Parade in 1993. He gave his collection to the archives several years ago, and that was the basis of that exhibition. And in the last couple of years, we've looked to do work on campus. Last year, we did something called Shades of the Rainbow on LGBT students, and that's in the second floor of the E building, and that came out well. We were really pleased with the results, so we decided this year to expand and to to talk to faculty and staff about their personal and professional experiences. So that's where we are right now.
You jumped ahead. Started talking about, but just listening to all the things, your studies, I feel like I want to hang around with you, probably in some like West Village club to let you go on.
That the neighborhood is near and dear to me. As I say, you just get priceless insights when you walk those streets, when you walk through Washington Square Park. And it was probably the most famous neighborhood in the country in the 50s and 60s. As suburbanization was taking place, people who chose not to embrace that lifestyle, many went to cities. Young people who couldn't fulfill their artistic ambitions, or an increasing LGBT population too, as we know, was centered in the village. So it really, I think, had institutions that gave people opportunities to reach their personal, fulfillment and political, artistic potential. And so, I just became fascinated by it and have really deepened and expanded to Queens since I've been at the archives.
Very good. And last but not least, the disembodied Thierry Gourjon. Say hi,
gentlemen. I'll give you the Cliff Note versions. I was born in Paris, France, in actually a Scandinavian household, because my mother is half Icelandic, half Norwegian, and studied in Paris until I got my French baccalaureate, as they say over there. Then, of all things, I started studying medicine for 3 years, and then after 3 years realized, even though I liked the subject matter, I was not passionate enough to continue. I would have made a miserable doctor if I continued. So I went back to my first love, which was photography. Then I moved to Iceland for about 4 years on and off, went back to France. And then when I really decided that it was time to get serious with my life, I realized I couldn't really study what I wanted in France. And moved to New York 27 years ago, went to Pratt Institute where I got a BFA and an MFA and then taught there for 7 years, and worked as a freelance and commercial photographer for 20 years until I, in my later years, started teaching more. And then I left Pratt to come to LaGuardia to be on the front line of higher education.
Yeah, that's the cliff notes. He left out a lot of other stuff like boxing. I guess when we've lived this long, right, Terry, we got a lot. There's a lot to talk about.
I can't remember any last week.
Anyhow, Stephen did a little bit of this, but why don't we take a little time talking about some of the things that we're doing that we do at the college. Gabriel, again, back to you with CLEP, which is no TELC, excuse me,
TELC.
The English Language Learning Center. And I want to say Liz Ionati is probably going to, or Mimi Blaber is going to. They're both going to kill me because I got all that stuff wrong. But tell us a little bit about coming to LaGuardia. How did you end up at LaGuardia after being an ESL gypsy for a little while?
When I started at LaGuardia, I had only just recently returned to New York after a number of years overseas. So just prior to returning to New York, I had been in Hungary for 2 years, where I was working for the Ministry of Education over there, doing curriculum and development and teacher training. And then before that, I was in Russia for a year. And to be honest, I hadn't really planned on returning to New York. But what happened the year that I came back, which was 2006, my mom's second husband had died, and my mom was, at that time, I thought my mom was old, but my mom is still living, thank God. But I felt like as my mom had just recently been widowed, I thought I should return to New York and, be the good son and all of that. So I returned to New York in the summer of 2006. The day after I got back, I made calls and I picked up classes at York College and where else? At York and at BMCC. Last minute filling in, that sort of thing. One thing led to another, and the following spring they hired me at TELC. And I've spent the past 15 years sort of teaching all over New York, but LaGuardia has been my main gig that entire time. And the others have been kind of secondary teaching gigs. Where am I going from here?
I think you've arrived. I was just going to say, you guys do a lot of great work at TELC. I know that. Because as I said, I check in. Though, Mimi, obviously, I check in and has been running TELC for years. But Liz is part of CLIP, right? Do I always?
No, you've got that reversed.
I've got it reversed now. So Liz is running TELC. Mimi runs CLIP. What's the difference? Can you tell? In 25 words or less? What's the difference between the two?
Okay, I'll do my best. CLIP stands for CUNY Language Immersion Program, and CLIP is a program for students who've already been accepted as degree students at CUNY, but need extra intensive work to be ready to study in credit classes, and that's CLIP. TELC is a non-credit program where students come to, it's an academic type ESL program, and many of our students transfer from TELC into the credit program proper. Okay. I don't know if that was 25 words, but that was
pretty good.
Okay.
Stephen, you talk. Oh no, sorry, Gabriel, you weren't done.
Yeah, I'm pretty well done. Yeah,
you're good. I'll be back.
Okay.
So, Stephen, you've talked a little bit about some of the things coming and some of the things you've done here, but I guess I would ask the question again: how did you end up at LaGuardia? What kind of factors played into the coming here and joining the archive?
Well, Hugo, it was really the opportunity to do New York City history, urban history at a major archives in New York City, and to return to CUNY. As I said, I did my PhD at the CUNY Grad Center and taught in many institutions within CUNY, and had been away for a few years at the Museum of the City of New York and New York Historical. So I really am very devoted to the mission of CUNY. And the position opened. In fact, a friend of mine, Nick Bloom, who's another urban historian, is now at Hunter, told me about the opening. and I applied, and I think I was just the right fit. I was familiar with a lot of the collections that we have at the archives. Many of them focus on mayors, from LaGuardia to Giuliani, but an increasing number of collections on social and cultural history of New York City. As I mentioned, the Daniel Drum collection several years ago, right around the time that I arrived. And so I was just really keen on staying in New York City, probing New York City history, staying in CUNY, doing work where I can engage students on campus, engage the public as well as much as I could off campus, to bring some of my skills that I had learned at the Museum of the City of New York as a curator. And it was really interesting because I think we were going in the direction of doing more and more exhibitions. And we were fortunate enough to get a major grant from the Gardner Foundation. In fact, one of my first assignments from Dr. Richard Lieberman when I arrived in 2016
who
was
hopefully is listening right now.
who I hope is, I suspect he is, knowing Dr. Lieberman.
If my link worked, yeah.
Yeah, and he said, look, we want to apply for this grant from the Gardner Foundation in Long Island. It could help us use our collections on campus and off campus. So I worked on that grant, and I learned about the drum collection. We got the grant, and then we decided to do an exhibition on the Queen's Pride Parade, the 25th anniversary at the Queen's Museum in 2017. It worked out well. It was called The Lavender Line, Coming Out in Queens. We were able to transfer that exhibition to other schools within the CUNY system in Queens, and each campus modified it somewhat. City Council was so impressed with our work that we received additional funding. And really, I think I was tasked with a leadership role at the archives, with my colleagues, to do more on LGBT studies, especially outside of Manhattan. As we know, there's been so much done on Stonewall and Lower Manhattan, but we were asking the question, what about the other neighborhoods in Queens in particular, in Jackson Heights? And what about our own students? What about our own faculty and staff? Has their story been told before? And it turns out their story hasn't been told. So, we're really excited to develop this original content, these oral histories, these videos, this photography, and make a contribution. So, for a variety of reasons, I came to the archives, and I'm just really, delighted to be able to work there, to use the collections, to engage with faculty, staff, and students.
Yeah, you did it again. You jumped, you jumped to right into the exhibition, but it's okay. I love the way we're kind of floating in between pieces.
Yeah.
But I want to get to Terry again, Terry, and maybe you gave us the quick cliff notes. And one of the things is I've known Terry and I guess we've known each other for maybe 15 years. I mean, when I came back to LaGuardia after a brief hiatus. I don't know if I remember you before Scott took over the program, Scott Sternbach, who's the director of the program. But I never heard the story. How did you end up at LaGuardia? I mean, what were the particular things that brought you here?
All right, so I will give you the long story because that one it's a long setup.
It's got a wow finish.
I am basically, I call myself an accidental teacher. And I got to LaGuardia almost by accident. And it started, I think it was in the late 90s. I can't remember the exact year, but at the time I was still shooting news and I had a press card. And I remember the KKK wanted to organize a demonstration in front of City Hall. I don't know if you gentlemen remember that episode. Yeah. And so I was there, and it was a completely surreal experience because essentially you had a pen around which you had probably 200 members of the press, and then you had an empty zone that was guarded by the police, and then you had a sea of protesters who wanted to get at the 7, because they ended up being 7 of them, individuals who wanted to protest. So we waited for a long time before anyone showed up. And there was an older gentleman next to me, and he started talking to me. So I pretend to be polite, and I start answering. And it turns out it was Ben Fernandez who was
Wow. Former
the
director.
photo program director at the time at LaGuardia before
Right.
Scott.
Yeah.
And so we started talking, and at the end, he gave me his contact info. I knew who he was, obviously, as a photographer.
Right.
And then we ended up exchanging info, and a few months passed, and at some point I had been working on a documentary on Gleason's Gym, which is in Dumbo, Brooklyn, which is the oldest boxing gym in the United States. And I just wanted to show it to Ben, as many young photographers want to do with more established photographers, just to get feedback. So I called him once. And he essentially hung up on me. So, all right. So that's just what happens with when you're a freelance photographer. You get hung up, or you hear no quite a lot. So it was fine. And for whatever reason, about 3 months later, I decided to call him again. And this time he was in a good mood. And so I was able to tell him to remind him that we met at the rally that we were both covering. And I just asked him, would it be possible for you to take a look at a body of work that I just completed? And I would be really interested in getting feedback from you. So he said, okay, just come to LaGuardia, which I did. And at the time, it was still in the location where we were near the Greek diner. I can't remember the name of the avenue.
Van Damme.
Yeah, we were just by the Van Damme diner. And so I get there, and he's there, we start talking. And then I show him my portfolio, and literally he just flipped through 7 pages, then looked at me and said, do you want a job here? And I said, of course. Because like, what else am I going to say? Yeah. But and so I started teaching one class a week for probably 15 years, which is when I met you, Hugo.
Right.
And then after 15 years, there was when a full-time position opened, I applied, and that's when I became full-time at LaGuardia and quit any other teaching jobs I had at the time too.
Very good. And Terry's. I always joke about his reputation because he frightens people with his demeanor is that of very tough disciplinarian type of fellow, but everybody knows he really has a good heart, and he's funny.
No, I have no heart. And I'm not funny. I'm a quarter French. I have no sense of humor.
Okay, very good. No, I think the Norwegian Icelandic thing is working for you.
Yeah, that's probably what saves me.
But before the half-hour mark, let's get into, and Stephen already started talking a little bit about this. So let's talk about Rainbow LaGuardia, and we can talk a little bit more about the genesis. But I'm also interested in how, obviously Stephen makes sense that your role in this. Terry, by the photography, I'm interested in how Gabriel got involved in this as well. So let's talk about that genesis and roles for about 3 minutes before I do my station break. Go.
Okay. So, it's my turn.
Well, no,
Yes.
actually, I was going to let Stephen kind of romance us into the.
Okay, let me give a 1 minute version here. Is that about almost a year ago or so, we were looking to build upon our Shades of the Rainbow exhibition, Hugo. Again, that was on LGBT students on campus. We had a successful exhibition. The same methods, oral history, video, oral histories were filmed, and we did a photography component as well. And we said, let's expand that and talk to faculty and staff. And I had about maybe 20 contacts among faculty and staff, LGBT faculty and staff. And so I reached out to individuals. I asked, do you know other people who might want to take part in this exhibition? We'll be doing this, this, and this. And Chelsea Del Rio, a historian, also helped in the sense that she created this Lavender LaGuardia site with LGBT faculty and staff listed their email addresses. So I contacted everybody one by one, and I said, look, we want you to tell your story, your personal story, your professional story in an exhibition context. It will involve photography. And we really think it's going to have an impact on campus. It will help build community, foster empathy, give us greater insight into the LGBT community and the LaGuardia community in general. And I contacted at first, ultimately about 31 agreed to participate in the exhibition. So we got a pretty good number. And we featured 15 of them beginning last week. Or 16. We'll do the remaining 15 when we get back to campus, when we can complete the photography portion. So that's a little bit about the origins of it. And to add these oral histories and these photographs to our LGBT collection at the archives for researchers and students to use as well.
Before I open it up to Gabriel and Terry, maybe we should just take a quick station break because it's the half-hour mark. You're watching What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. My guests today are Dr. Stephen Petrus, who is a historian with the LaGuardia and Wagner Archives, and Professors Thierry Gourjon of the Humanities Department's Commercial Photography Program, and Gabriel Skop of the English Language Center of the Division of Adult and Continuing Education, TELC, we're talking about the Rainbow LaGuardia exhibition, which through oral history, video, and photography chronicles the personal and professional experiences of the college's LGBT faculty and staff as part of Pride Month. But did a better job that time, right? So how is it that Terry and Gabriel become a part of this? I mean, I know that Terry had worked on previous exhibitions.
Well, that's really it. You know, Terry's one of our great partners at the archives since 2017, when we did the Queen's Museum exhibition based largely on the Daniel Drum collection on the origins of the Queen's Pride Parade. Terry and his student photographers worked with us, and they captured contemporary LGBT sites in the borough for that exhibition. And in Shades of the Rainbow, with the students, they took the student portraits and the faculty and staff portraits. So we've always had a great collaborative relationship, and you know, any opportunity to work with him is a good one, and we appreciate him and his students.
Terry, how is this different from just teaching like a photography class, like intermediate?
This is, you know how we like in academia, we like to throw the word real world assignment. This is as real world as could be, because what I did, which is the same thing I did with Shades of the Rainbow, is in the last fall, I selected 5 of my students who volunteered, and I just, I put out a call and saw how many were willing to participate, and then I selected 5, and then we just started training for an entire semester. And my job as a former commercial photographer was to essentially train them and show them both the technical part of shooting on location with flash and available light. That's just the technical part, but also try to show them how to stay creative while under pressure, which is a really, really big part of being an artist and being a professional, is when you have to go and see, for when Makoto and Nick went to see Gabriel, they had been trained as to, we shot mock assignments, and then I talked a lot about the psychology of shooting. How do you interact with people? I told them about my successes and my failures. When I was a young photographer and I made all the mistakes, I told them this is what you do and this is what you do not do. And so we trained for the entire fall semester, and by I think it was early February, my students had, part of their job was to contact their subject. So we had gone over how do you draft an email, how do you, all of the little steps that they will they would encounter when they start working as professionals, like from. So it was a lot of it, not just the technique, which is not easy to learn, but that's easy to teach. The rest was much more challenging. And I found out that by telling them of my mistakes and telling them this is where I did wrong and this is how I should have handled it, they seem to relate to that a lot, because they just realize that you're going to make mistakes. The fact that you make a mistake is not the issue. It's how do you recover from the mistake that's really important. So we did that, and then I believe it was mid-February when they started contacting the participants, and that's when Gabriel got his email.
You want to talk about that, Gabriel? By the way,
I-
I've sent Chris the link to the website, because we didn't, in all of our putting this all together, I think I'd originally wanted to let folks see the website as well. So I don't know, Chris, if you can open that up and then wrangle our little screens on the Twitch stream so that we can see it. He's typing something. He's working on it. Thank you very much, Chris. So Gabriel, you get a call. What do they want from you?
Well, it's interesting because when I got the email from Nicholas, who was one of the two photographers, I had already had I'd had my first interview with Stephen at his office. I had the filmed interview with Stephen and the videographer in my apartment, and that was a pretty long, involved process. And when I was anticipating a photo shoot, I thought, oh, a photographer's going to come and they'll take 2 pictures and they'll leave and that'll be that. But Nicholas and Makoto, who worked as his assistant, when they showed up in my apartment with, a truckload worth of lights and, things that I don't even know the names for, I saw, oh, this is not going to be a 5-minute Sears portrait shot.
Right.
And they were in my apartment for about 3 hours. And I don't know how many pictures they took, but for me, it was such a meaningful experience, not just having my picture taken, but the interaction with them, the questions they asked me, the questions I asked them. And in some ways, it looms larger than it might have, because they were the last 2 people I saw face to face before we were told to shut down at home.
Oh my God.
Because that was the middle of March. And then just a couple of days after Nicholas and Makoto were here, we went into quarantine. And we started teaching on Zoom. So that was, in some ways, that was kind of the beginning of the culmination of the project. And I was anxious because I don't necessarily like having my picture taken, but they put me at ease. And they were genuinely interested in, there's a lot going on in my little apartment. And they had a lot of questions about the objects I'd collected. But I wondered if, you wanted me to get back to how I got involved in the project to begin with. Is that?
Yeah, I thought I did, but because I guess a lot of stuff happens at the end of the semester, and so much of this we were putting together, and because my understanding was you were an integral role in putting the show together, and when Terry introduced you now and you started talking, I realized, oh, wait a minute, you're the subject, and then
Yes.
so a whole another list of questions is coming up. And Chris, by the way, has been able to put the header for the website on the Twitch stream, and maybe if he scrolls down, we could see a few of the pictures. Maybe we can even find yours. But yeah, talk about
Sure.
your deeper involvement.
Yeah, just to be clear to listeners, I'm not in any way, shape, or form one of the organizers. I'm just another interviewee who got lucky enough for this chance to be on the air with you. Sort of as context, a year or 2 before I'd seen the call for LGBTQ professors on campus to participate, I'd responded to a call from the Wellness Center saying we're looking for gay, queer identified staff to put on workshops for LGBTQ students. And, anytime I see something like that, if I'm able, I try to do something. And mostly it's reflecting back on my experience as a high schooler, as a college kid, and not having been aware, I mean, not having had any out gay, lesbian, bisexual teachers at all. And so feeling like if there's some way that I can sort of pave a little bit of path for a student to say, oh, you know, there's somebody who's gone through this and made it through and survived and thrived, or just to open up space for conversation. So I put on a couple of workshops at the Wellness Center that I really enjoyed doing. I think they were fairly well received. And I responded to this call from Chelsea Del Rio. Do you want to? And I had no idea what this exhibit was going to be about. I went to meet Stephen. He gave me a tour of the archives. And, you know, and then weeks later, a couple of months later, he and his videographer were in my apartment and asking me to dredge up memories from when I had a lot of dark hair a long, long time ago. So that's, you know, that's how I got involved.
You still got hair though.
Yeah, there's a misting up there. Yeah.
So yes, Stephen, it was when Gabriel started talking, it did cross my mind. Well, how did they find people? What did they, you know, how did they decide who the subjects were going to be? And but also I see that it's not just photographs. There is that the historical piece that we were talking about, where the, you know, the interviews, personal interviews.
Yes, exactly, Hugo. I mean, this was really the first step, was to recruit people. And as I said, I had a network of about 20, and that ultimately resulted in 31. And the first step was really, yeah, to send that email to invite them to participate. And then we met at the archives, and I did a preliminary interview, basically. I did give people a tour of the archives. Many of them weren't familiar with the archives and what we do, our collections. And then I said, look, you know, we want to talk about subjects of interest to you. You know, I'm not here to interrogate or probe, but really have a conversation, do an oral history. I have some ideas in mind. You know, I do want to talk about coming out. I want to talk about family support. I want to talk about your community, your hometown, when you came of age, where you went to college, undergraduate, graduate, and how you developed your identity, your you know, when you started to grapple with ideas of sexual orientation, gender identity, and where that all converged in a time and place. So we had, and that's really, I think, key to this whole process, was the preliminary conversation, and to ask people, like, what do you want to talk about? And, you know, because I had my own agenda in mind, and then I, you know, took notes. I shared those notes with Terry and his student photographers, so they already had a sense, you know, okay, I'm going to meet Gabriel Skop, and they had bullet points about Gabriel. And then I did the formal interview with our videographer, Brandon Calva, at the archives. We did most of them on campus. In Gabriel's case, we actually went to his home, and that was wonderful. And we just had really, I think, a very engaging conversation with people. 60 minutes, 90 minutes, getting to these important issues. And I can really kind of sense, you know, when people were excited, the tempo changed, they modulated their voices, they became increasingly excited. And, you know, we would go on riffs and probe those points. And from those 60 to 90-minute interviews, I identified maybe 3, 4, 5, or 6 short excerpts where our subjects made an important point. About a whole range of subjects. I think we've got 57 video clips in total for 16 interviewees about, again, a variety of topics that I think will spark conversation, provoke people, interest people, start dialogues, you know, could be used in the classroom as part of curriculum, sort of like minor epiphanies, aha moments. In Gabriel's case, I selected short clips about when he saw 2 young men kissing on the subway, the pride and concern that he saw. I found that to be particularly moving. Or his first personal experience with AIDS in 1981 in San Francisco. His colleague had died of AIDS. He talked poignantly about that. Or in the use of the slur, quote, fag, the F word, and his reaction to that, how people within the community, outside the community, how people use it, and who should be able to use it, who should not be able to use it. I thought those were really provocative, poignant excerpts from his interview. So I said, let's identify them, let's isolate them, include them with his photograph in a short 1-paragraph vignette about him, about his experience, in this case, in Washington, D.C. in the late 1970s. So it's really like multifaceted to get to know the subjects and to see, you know, this is your story. You haven't really told your story in a formal way, doing an oral history for our campus and for researchers on and off campus. So it was really exhilarating. And it was a process of gaining trust. I mean, these are very personal, intimate stories. So I felt like I had to gain their trust. Who is this guy asking me about coming out? That's not just a random, easy topic to talk about. So again, it took a little while to gain trust into, but I think almost everyone was very candid, open, intimate. They made themselves vulnerable in these oral history interviews, and in making themselves vulnerable, they really showed their strength, and they really gave us a lot to think about. And I'm really proud of the results, both the oral histories as well as the photography.
So I just got a message from Professor Riccio, Dr. Riccio, who's manning the Twitch stream. There are no questions coming in because I usually open up this section for questions. I will say also that through the Twitch stream, Chris has tried to put up some screenshots. The header is still up there, but there are also some images of some of the specific photographs. So I really recommend audience members go check out. I was particularly impressed, having just recently had some dealings with building websites, but I was very impressed with the caliber of the actual site itself, and the images, of course, by our students, which Professor Gourjon, you should be very proud of the work they've done. And obviously, I need to read some of the stories. But usually in this part of the show, the last quarter, we talk about the future, if there are no questions from folks. So I would say to you, what's next? And, you know, Terry, you want to?
Yeah, I can. Well, what's next for us? And Stephen has alluded to it already. We had 31 participants, and in the 3 weeks before the shutdown, we were able to capture 16 of them. So of course we want to finish the project, and that's really important to the entire team. And we want to be able to, as soon as it's safe for everyone, we want to be able to capture the remaining 15 participants, and that will go, of course, on the website. But then once we have all 31, we want to bring that to LaGuardia in the form of a permanent exhibit, probably across from Shades of the Rainbow, and that will make that entire atrium area a safe place, and essentially a shining example of fight for equality. It would be wonderful to have the faculty on one wall across from the students on the other wall. So that's in the immediate future for Stephen and I.
Yeah, well, I think it already is that, considering that you guys are facing the MLK exhibition, and I just hope we can find a good place for that work. With that work, if it does indeed come down, but that may be another show. Stephen, what future plans as well?
Yeah, as Terry said, Hugo, I'm working on the other 15 oral history interviews, again, each 60 to 90 minutes long, and the same process to really find 3, 4, 5, or 6 clips, short clips, 30, 45, 60 seconds each, where the participants really make a significant point, or their recollection is particularly poignant, something personal, but that is also universal, where someone in Akron, Ohio, or Wichita, Kansas can see it and say, oh, okay, yeah, I can identify, I can relate, or my experience was a little different. So I want to pick a range of vignettes from the remaining interviews, edit them with Brandon at the archives and other staff, and write short snapshots of each individual. And these short snapshots you see, Hugo, aren't meant to be miniature biographies, but little windows into the experience of each person. Little, like, you know, that kind of give you insight into their own their personal experiences. So I will do that as well. And also, I think in a larger sense, we want to spread the word, what we're doing right here as we speak, to let people know that we've done this, that this is maybe a model for other colleges. Other campuses might embrace a similar kind of project to talk to their own LGBT students, faculty, and staff, to get their stories archived for future individuals to read. They're inspirational, they're provocative, they're on multiple levels, to share the results of our work with the widest audience possible. Because I think when people hear someone like Paul Arcario's experience of how, for example, he was reluctant to come out, to be out in the classroom when he came to LaGuardia 30 years ago, but how that changed over time, you know, that's meaningful. Or to hear Neil Myers from the English department, his coming out story to his family, and how he was nervous with his father, how his brother, who had often been antagonistic with him, embraced him. These recollections, Hugo, are beautiful. They're really wonderful. They're touching, and I think that they help build us. They expand us, who we are. They foster empathy, and so we want to spread it as much as possible. We want to let people know, our colleagues at other CUNY campuses and beyond CUNY. So again, we really appreciate this opportunity. So that's the future. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a book from it. We did a book based on our first exhibition at the Queens Museum, also called The Lavender Line. Basically, an accompanying book with photographs by Terry's students, photographs from the drum collection, historical essays by students. So, you know, we really think of it as multifaceted. You know, an exhibition, maybe a book, public programs, maybe a symposia on campus. I plan on speaking about this work at conferences, on Twitter, you know, on multiple forums. So any way we can, you know, share the good news and let people know what we've done, and that these stories are important to know. You know, we truly feel passionate that the photographers captured part of the essence of our subjects. The oral history is the same way, you know, to help build the beloved community that Martin Luther King used to talked about, you know, in that sense. I think that's our ultimate grand vision.
Gabriel,
Yes.
what are you thinking in the future, as far as whether it's part of the exhibition or not?
Well, related to the exhibition, you know, I'm thinking back to the student exhibition a year ago, and for me, the most meaningful part of that was when it opened up and the audience, the viewers, had the chance to have conversations with the participants. So I'm hoping that that opportunity becomes available when we're permitted to come back to campus. For me, the chance to have the larger LaGuardia community interact with the subjects of the exhibit just is so powerful. So I'm hoping that happens. I don't know when that might happen, but
yeah, right. I mean, it's funny because of the last opening, you bring this back to me now. We actually were streaming live from the opening. I think we had like a wireless mic, and so obviously we had all of the speeches, but then afterwards people were looking at the work, and I had the opportunity to ask people, both subjects and the photographers, about that process, and that was a great event, which by the way is archived somewhere in our archives. So yeah, that would be really good when the time comes, because this is a kind of something that just keeps giving in so many ways. Like Stephen mentioned, a book. You're talking about events, and I'm thinking, you know, Terry, for the takeaways for your students, this is going to be a big piece for them. A lot of learning happened in that little short period of time. And have you considered screenshots, Terry? Have you considered people, you know, connecting via some mechanism like this and
You know what?
photographing them through the computer?
we briefly thought about it, and the problem and why I shut it down immediately is the students spend so much time setting up the lights, giving. Right. These are not snapshots. These are true portraits. These are really interesting images that represent a facet of the person they shot. And no, screenshots are not an option. This is not something where you can just show up. As Gabriel was saying, my students will show up with equipment, not just a cell phone, and they will set up the light. They will. If you look at Gabriel's picture, it's a beautiful picture that's joyful. I know, Gabriel, it's probably difficult or uneasy to look at yourself Yes, I completely understand that process, but
which today's show illustrates.
Yeah, but the work that these students did on these 16 images is beautiful, and they really worked at their craft. I've shown it to other colleagues, some who teach at Pratt, some who teach at Yale, and and when I told them that these were second year and third year students, they were floored. So
yes, we do produce a high caliber of photographic quality for our students.
We might be a junior college, but there's nothing junior about the talents of our students.
Or our program.
Or our program too.
We're out of time, folks. So last little bits of thank yous or anything last that you'd like to say with about a minute or so of time.
If I could jump in just for 30 seconds, because you mentioned it, I just want to put and thank our web designing team, Mike Schuwerk, Oleg Kleban, and Isadora Martinez, and Brendan Calvis, who did a fantastic job creating the website for us in a very short amount of time under difficult conditions.
It's a very good show, very good website.
If I can add to that, I agree, Terry. And one last point, Hugo, in a few seconds, I encourage all faculty listening to, really explore this. Give a lot of time to the exhibition, watch the excerpts, and think about how to using it as course curriculum. Maybe just one assignment. If you can integrate it into the classroom, I think it will spark lively debate, discussion. There are multiple points of views on a single issue, so that's really good to hear various perspectives. And if we can take this show elsewhere too, we're hoping to take the student show from last year to Leslie Lohman Museum in Soho. I can say that because the people at Leslie Lohman toured it, and we're absolutely blown away, and we're hoping to transfer that. It'll be difficult under these circumstances with COVID, but we have big goals. We have big ambitions to bring our work, and anyone who's thinking about it, especially in curriculum, we hope you will consider it.
Gabriel?
Yeah, well, Stephen took the words out of my mouth. I had actually sent a mass message to all of my colleagues at LaGuardia and to a large group of friends saying, please watch this show today. Please look at the Rainbow LaGuardia site. And I also included a link to the archives because there's so much information there to be used in the classroom. But I'll just put this message out to any of my colleagues listening at LaGuardia or elsewhere in CUNY. If you want to talk to me about any aspect of this, or even if you'd like me to come talk to students, I'm nervous about it, but I'm also more than happy to engage.
Thank you, gentlemen. You've been watching or listening to what's going on. Today, my guests have been Dr. Stephen Petrus, the historian in the LaGuardia and Wagner Archives, and Professors Thierry Gourjon of the Humanities Department's Commercial Photography Program, and Gabriel Skop of the English Language Center of the Division of Adult and Continuing Education. We've been talking about the Rainbow LaGuardia exhibition, which is a virtual exhibition and available online. And it is oral history, video, photography, and chronicling the personal and professional experiences of the college's LGBT faculty and staff as part of Pride Month. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And Mr. Pope, please take us out the way we came in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching and listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo.
Thanks very much, Hugo.